Hello, I'm Simon Margolis, an autistic lawyer in Toronto pursuing an LLM in tax law. This is the first of hopefully many video essays I intend to make on a variety of issues which straddle the worlds of law and neurodivergence. These are opinion pieces and are not intended to be legal advice. I'm going to start by discussing a well-intentioned trend which concerns me a little bit. The eagerness with which some, particularly in Europe, want to build neurodiversity into an environmental, social, and governance ESG framework. So, what is ESG? I am not an expert in the area, but in essence, ESG allows investment firms to create metrics which show how companies which these firms trade in are doing in terms of meeting certain environmental, social, and governance goals. While we can trace ESG back to activist investing, which developed in response to apartheid in the 1970s and 1980s, ESG really took off as a result to changes in corporate law over the past 3 decades. Traditionally, in common law jurisdictions, directors of companies have had a fiduciary duty to act in the interests of their shareholders. In Canada, as well as many other jurisdictions, that fiduciary duty has evolved. No longer is the fiduciary duty to act in the short term interest of the shareholders, but to the company as a whole. As a result, the directors need to balance the needs of other types of stakeholders beyond shareholders, such as creditors, employees, debenture holders, very so often debt and equity, employees, the whole shebang. And this can be complicated because the balance of which of these stakeholders, debt, equity, employees, surrounding 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 stakeholders, the balance of which stakeholders to consider changes depending on the factual circumstances. However, what this means is that when given a choice between a business decision that increases share value and a business decision which is more likely to promote the viability of a company over time or make it more reliable to its creditors, this latter decision that doesn't necessarily serve the short-term interests of the shareholders is now much easier to justify. In other, perhaps overly simplified words, for large corporations, the emphasis has shifted from the short-term interests of the current shareholders to the long-term interests of shareholders, including future shareholders. A company which stiffs its creditors and employees or pollutes the environment around it so that the real estate becomes uninhabitable. They may save money in the short term, but it will cost the company and its shareholders in the long term. It is in this environment where fiduciary duties of directors have broadened beyond the short term interests of their shareholders that corporations can now keep ESG information and provide it to investment firms. They can make decisions which temporarily reduce the share value of their company's stock in order to boost a metric which shows whether they are meeting certain environmental, social, or governance goals. These goals can include not only environmental impact, but also diversity, commitment to human rights, and positive social impact more generally. While ESG has become the big thing in corporate law, neurodiversity has also hit the public lexicon. As a result, consultants, particularly in Europe and the United Kingdom, they're seeing dollar signs, and they are trying to blur the line between neurodivergence as a disability accommodation issue and neurodiversity as an ESG diversity issue. And it is possible that the neurodiversity paradigm has historically used buzzwords that might make it attractive to frame it that way. As a result, we see neurodiversity consultants working with clients to set things such as neurodivergent representation targets, where, say, a company commits to having 3% of their employees being neurodivergent. There are some key problems here. Firstly, the percentage of neurodivergent people in the workforce, not even the population, is going to greatly exceed 3% if you include ADHD. And even if we were just talking about autism by itself, and there are many neurodivergences, but autism is the one which gets the most attention. Even if we're just talking about autism, which is going to be close to 3% of the population, um, many autistic people self diagnose or don't know. So it is much harder to actually know whether you've reached your target or not. These numbers are really hard to keep. If you include ADHD and dyslexia, you'll need a 20% neurodivergence representation target to really represent the population. And if you do, and if you're just looking at autism and you're just using neurodiversity as a code for autism, don't do that, by the way. It's not very nice. Um, if you're just doing that, it's really hard to figure out how to get there. So so there's a demographic problem. Demographically, it's actually hard to do a neurodivergent representation target. But beyond this demographic issue, setting top-line neurodivergent inclusion targets doesn't do anything to address the fact that a lot of the exclusion that neurodivergent employees face is due to employers not knowing how to accommodate neurodivergence. And many of the experts tasked with explaining how to accommodate neurodivergent employees to employers don't actually know how to accommodate these employees either. Um, and the reason why is political and not left right, but in terms of who gets what. Um, when politics forces people to say that autism is primarily a disability of behaviors and social communication, when the most effective accommodations, ask anyone really, the most effective accommodations appear to be sensory accommodations, you're going to run into issues. There's a mismatch between what people say the disability is and how to accommodate it. And so that's a problem, and it confuses a lot of labor and employment lawyers. And I explain, and one of the things I do in my work is I explain to labor and employment lawyers that you can't just go to the DSM to understand what the disability is. Um, Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You'd like the experts to be able to the framework to basically make sense, and it sometimes doesn't. Um, and because of that, it's hard to get a clear line on accommodations on. And so as a result, many autistic employees do not get the accommodations they need. As I say in the lectures I give to law firms and legal organizations, an unaccommodated neurodivergent employee often looks like a lazy employee. And as a result, if you hire a bunch of neurodivergent employees, without a clear inclusion plan, you are going to hire a lot of neurodivergent employees who, through no fault of their own, will look unreliable to their employer. And this will not improve the public perception of neurodivergent employees. We not only need to hire more neurodivergent employees, we also need to leave a good impression of neurodivergent employees for future cohorts of neurodivergent employees. As a result, I do not think that rushing to include neurodiversity into an ESG framework is a particularly good idea. What I would prefer is working within existing labor, employment, and human rights regimes, aware that the expert evidence regarding neurodivergent accommodation is a little shakier than we would like it to be. While I do not think there is necessarily a place for ESG, at least not yet, there is a place for well-structured and nuanced DEI programming, which coincidentally is something I offer. If you watch Fox News or consume a lot of conservative media or listen to conservative critics such as Vivek Ramaswamy, I think you will get a particularly negative impression of ESG, that it is some leftist idea to undermine capitalism or enrich its consultant class at the expense of the retail investor. And I don't think that that's entirely true. What I do think is that corporate law is not well equipped to handle particularly complicated issues such as these. And I do think there are academics in business schools and consultants in management consulting firms who are a little bored with the basics of their jobs and try to spice things up by making the world a better place through changes to basic business theory. I wish them all the personal success in the world. I hope they cure their boredom. But I do not think these people are necessarily well equipped to rectify the systemic failures which have led to neurodivergent exclusion. Please like, subscribe, do whatever you wish to boost the algorithm. Please reach out on LinkedIn if you would like to learn more, and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.